Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into the nuts and bolts of what really makes good writing work. We're going to be breaking down phrases and clauses. These are the absolute essential building blocks you need to construct clear, powerful sentences in English.
So, let's start with the big question. What is the real difference between a phrase and a clause? It's a question that stumps a lot of people, but trust me, understanding this one little distinction is the key to becoming a much more confident writer. So let's break it down.
All right, first up, the core difference. Let's get this sorted out once and for all so you can clearly see what separates a phrase from a clause. Okay, this table here makes it super simple. Look, both are just groups of words, right? But here is the key, the absolute most important part. A clause must have both a subject and a verb that go together. A phrase, on the other hand, is missing one or maybe even both of those. So in the example, running to the store, we have no idea who is running. But in she ran to the store, bam, we have our subject, she, and our verb, ran. That's the whole game right there. And here is a simple two-step check that honestly works every single time. First, just find the verb, the action. Then ask yourself, who or what is doing that action? If the answer is right there in that group of words, congratulations, you found yourself a clause. If not, it's a phrase. Easy as that.
So now that we can actually spot a clause out in the wild, let's look at the two main types you're going to see, independent and dependent. Understanding how these two function is the really important next step.
First up, we have the independent clause. I want you to think of this one as the strong, self-sufficient one. It expresses a complete thought and it can stand all by itself as a full, complete sentence. Something like, I love reading books. See, it makes perfect sense on its own, no extra questions needed.
And then, on the other hand, we have the dependent clause. And just like its name suggests, it's dependent. It has a subject and a verb, sure, but it does not express a complete thought. It just can't stand on its own as a sentence, because it needs more information to make any sense. म्हणजेच या वाक्याला पूर्ण अर्थासाठी दुसऱ्या वाक्यावर अवलंबून राहावे लागते.
Look at how this works. I was exhausted. That's a complete thought. That's our independent clause. But watch what happens when we add just one little word, because. Because I was exhausted. All of a sudden it feels totally incomplete. It just leaves you hanging, right? Waiting for the rest of the story.
So here's the crucial takeaway. You have to look out for these signal words like because, if, when, while. These are called subordinating conjunctions, and they are the #1 sign that you're looking at a dependent clause. They create a connection that just has to have an independent clause to finish the thought.
Okay, now for the really fun part. Let's see how we can use these clauses to build better, more interesting sentences. And this isn't just about boring old grammar rules. It's about unlocking the power to combine your ideas in more sophisticated ways.
So one way you can do this is by creating a compound sentence. This is when you join two complete thoughts, two independent clauses, using something called a coordinating conjunction. A fantastic way to remember these is the acronym FANBOYS. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. For example, I love soda, but I know it's bad for me. Two complete ideas joined right there by but.
And the other way is to build a complex sentence. Now this is where you combine an independent clause with at least one dependent clause. This is how you start to add all those wonderful layers of detail and context and nuance to your writing.
Now, when you start building these complex sentences, there is one critical punctuation rule you have got to remember. If your sentence starts with a dependent clause, you must place a comma right after it. That little comma is a signal to your reader that the introduction is over and the main idea is coming up next.
Here we go, a perfect illustration of that exact rule. The dependent clause, because I was exhausted, starts the sentence. So to separate it from the main clause, I didn't go to the party, we pop that comma right in after exhausted. It just creates a nice, clear, easy-to-read sentence.
But wait, watch what happens when we just flip the order. I didn't go to the party because I was exhausted. See? Here, the dependent clause is at the end, and in this case, no commas needed at all. The word because does all the work of connecting the two ideas smoothly. Seeing these two side by side makes that rule crystal clear, doesn't it?
So why are dependent clauses so incredibly useful? Well, it's because they are so versatile. They can actually take on the jobs of different parts of speech inside a sentence. Let's explore the three main functions a dependent clause can have. As this chart shows us, a dependent clause can act as a noun, an adjective, or an adverb. It's this amazing flexibility that lets us pack way more specific information into a single sentence. So let's take a look at each of these roles. First up, the noun clause. This is a dependent clause that basically works as one single noun in the sentence. In our example, whatever mom cooked smells delicious. That whole first part is acting as the subject. A great way to test this is to try and replace that whole clause with just one noun. We could say, the soup smells delicious, and hey, the sentence still works perfectly.
Next, we've got the adjective clause. You might also hear this called a relative clause. Its job is super simple. It just describes a noun or pronoun, giving us more information about it. In The Book That I Borrowed Was Incredible, the clause tells us which book we're talking about. It answers the question, which one, or what kind.
And finally, we have the adverb clause. This one acts as an adverb, so it modifies a verb, or an adjective, or even another adverb. It answers all those great questions like when, where, why, or how an action happened. You can sit down wherever you like. That clause, wherever you like, is telling us where you can sit. It's modifying the verb sit.
Okay, that's enough theory. It is time to practice and make sure these concepts really stick in your brain. I'm going to show you 2 sentences. For each one, I want you to pause and try to identify the clause before I give you the answer. You ready? Let's do it.
All right, take a look at this one. If we have some spare time in the evening, go ahead and pause here and think about it. Got it? Okay, it is a dependent clause. That little signal word if right at the beginning makes it an incomplete thought. It leaves us wondering, well, what will happen if we have spare time?
Okay, on to the next one. The kids played outside until it got dark. What job is that highlighted clause doing? Pause again and really think about it. The answer is, it's an adverb clause. But why? Because it's telling us when the kids played. It's modifying the verb played, answering the question, until when?
Wow, we've covered a lot today, from the basic building blocks all the way to combining them into more powerful sentences. So my final question for you is this. How are you going to use a dependent clause today to add more detail to your own writing? The more you practice, I promise, the more natural it becomes. Happy writing!